the California Gold Rush. Take a deep breath, feel the day slowly fading away as you prepare for a calm story. Get comfortable in your bed, wrap yourself in a blanket, and slowly close your eyes. Allow yourself to relax. Tonight, we are going to take a long journey through time and space to a place where the golden California sun illuminated the dreams of thousands of people, to the middle of the 19th century, when news of gold spread throughout the world. Feel the gentle desert wind and the sound of distant rivers. Imagine the dust on the roads and the quiet camps where people cook their meals by the fire. Imagine rivers carrying golden grains, and people leaving their homes in search of wealth and adventure. Before we begin our journey through time, write in the comments where you are right now, in which part of the world you are sitting or lying down, and what time it is on your clock. It will be really interesting to know where people are listening to us from. This is the story of the California Gold Rush, a story that changed the fate of an entire continent. Calm down, make yourself comfortable, and listen as the wind of the prairies carries us back to those distant times. Background back then, when our world was still very different, America stretched from the Atlantic to the Pacific. But much of this land remained virtually untouched. California, this distant, almost fairy tale land in the west, belonged to Mexico, and only occasionally did pioneers and travelers venture there. Imagine endless prairies where the grass sways in the wind like ocean waves. Where big cities now stand, only wildflowers grew and herds of bison grazed. The California coast, with its fog and cedar forest, was home to Native American tribes who had lived there for thousands of years. San Francisco, today a big city, was then a small settlement called Yerba Buena. Only a few hundred residents, mostly Mexicans, and a few American settlers lived a quiet, measured life. They raised cattle, grew grain, traded in hides. Life flowed slowly, like a river carrying its waters through the valleys. In the morning, people woke up with the sun, milked cows, fed chickens. Women baked bread in clay ovens. Men worked in the fields or with livestock. In the evenings by the fireplace, families gathered together, told stories, played the guitar, sang old songs. The days passed one after another, like pages in an old book. Winter brought rain, turning the hills of California into green carpets. Spring blossomed with poppies and lupins. Summer warmed with golden sunshine, and autumn painted the vineyards in crimson colors. But somewhere out there, in the rivers and mountains, in places where no human foot had ever trod, nature hid its treasures. Gold lay in the river sand, washed out of the mountain rocks by rain and streams, waiting for its time. Meanwhile, in the east of the continent, life was quite different. New York, Boston, Philadelphia, big cities where factories operated and ships arrived from all over the world. There, people heard only rumors about the distant West, stories about prairies and mountains, about Indians and pioneers. Many dreamed of new lands, of opportunities. But the journey to the West was long and dangerous. Months in a wagon across the prairies. The risk of Indian attacks, disease, hunger. Only the most determined dared to take such a step. And so, quietly and peacefully, America lived its life, unaware that everything was about to change, that soon a wave would sweep across the continent, bringing millions of people to the West, a wave of gold fever. But all that was still ahead. And for now, in distant California, among the pine forests of Sierra Nevada, rivers flowed quietly, carrying small grains of gold in their waters, unknown to anyone, unwanted by anyone, just a part of the great, peaceful nature. The beginning of the rush, it was a normal morning on January 24th. 1848. The fog had not yet lifted over the valley of the American River when James Marshall, an ordinary carpenter, was working at Sutter's sawmill. He was checking the mill dam canal, as he had done many times before. Imagine this quiet morning scene. Pine trees standing in the fog, like ghosts, water quietly gurgling through canal, birds not yet beginning their morning song. And suddenly, Marshall notices something unusual, a glint in the water, something yellow, bright. He bends down, picks up a few small stones. Heavy, yellow, shiny. His heart begins to beat faster. But Marshall is a cautious man. He knows that pyrite, fool's gold, is abundant in the mountains. He needs to check. Over the next few days, Marshall and John Sutter, the owner of the sawmill, conduct various tests. They hit the metal with a hammer, dip it in acid, weigh it, and each test confirms it's real gold. Sutter realizes that this discovery could change everything. He asks Marshall to keep quiet, at least for a while. After all, Sutter is building his ranch here, his empire, and if people find out about the gold, they will come here by the thousands, destroy his plan. His peaceful life, but secrets, especially big ones, are hard to keep one of the sawmill workers. Henry Bigler writes in his diary, Mr. Marshall found gold in the lower canal. Other workers, quietly, secretly, begin to search for gold in their spare time, and gradually, rumor by rumor, the news begins to spread, first to the nearest settlements, then to San Francisco, but people don't really believe it. Gold in California? Hardly. Maybe a few grains, no more. The turning point comes in May, when Samuel Brennan, a merchant and newspaper publisher, arrives in Coloma to check out the rumors. He sees the gold, talks to the prospectors, and realizes that it's real, but Brennan is a cunning man. Before telling the world, he buys up all the tools, all the supplies in the stores of San Francisco, and then on a May Day, Brennan walks out onto the streets of San Francisco, holding a bottle of gold dust in his hand, and shouts, "Gold, gold from the American River." And then it's like a dam burst. Within a few days, San Francisco is almost empty. Doctors leave their patients. Teachers leave their students. Merchants close their shops. Everyone goes to look for gold. The ship's captain writes in his report, of the 300 crew members, only 6 remain. The rest have fled to the gold mines. Newspapers stop publishing because journalists have also gone to search for gold. In San Francisco, schools are closing, courts, even the prison is left almost unguarded. But this is only the beginning. News of California. Gold begins to spread across America. It flies eastward like wildfire. Newspapers print sensational headlines. Gold. Rivers of gold in California. At first, people don't believe it. It's too fantastic. But then, in December 1848, President Polk confirms in his address to Congress that California gold is real. Samples are brought to Washington, several pounds of gold dust and nuggets, and then all of America went crazy. Gold fever, real fever, swept across the continent. People quit their jobs, sold their farms, spent all their savings on a trip to California. They believed that easy riches awaited them there. Gold that could simply be picked up from the riverbed. The winter of 1848 to 49 was a time of preparation. People across America were preparing for a great journey, buying supplies, tools, studying maps. They did not yet know what awaited them, what trials, what disappointments. But the dream was stronger than anything else, and in California, in the places where Marshall found the first grains of gold, hundreds of people were already working. They washed the sand, dug the earth, day after day, searching for the glitter of gold. And some did indeed find it. Stories of successful prospectors spread across the country, adding fuel to the fever. Thus began one of the largest migrations in human history, the gold rush that changed the face of America forever. The path of the gold seekers. When spring 1849 came to the east coast of America, thousands of people were already preparing for a great journey. They stood at piers at train stations near wagon camps, with bags and money boxes in their hands. With hope in their eyes, they were called 49ers after the year when their epic journey began. There were 3 main routes to California. Each had its advantages and dangers, its trials and opportunities. The shortest, but most dangerous, led across the prairies along what was called the California Trail. The second, the sea route, skirted Cape Horn at the southern tip of South America. The third, also by sea, but crossing the Isthmus of Panama. The first option, the overland route, was the most popular among farmers and laborers, people who could not afford the expensive sea voyage. They gathered in Independence, St. Joseph. Other cities in Missouri bought oxen, wagons, formed caravans of 20 to 30 families. Imagine this gathering. Thousands of wagons covered with white canvas tarpaulins, like a fleet of ships ready to set sail. Men checked the wheels, harnessed the oxen. Women packed the last few things. Supplies for 4 or 5 months. Children running between the wagons, playing, not yet understanding what a long journey awaits them. Each wagon carried sacks of flour, salted meat, beans, coffee, sugar, guns and powder, tools, clothes, a minimum of furniture. The family's entire life fit into a wooden box on wheels. Many took livestock, cows for milk, chickens for eggs, horses for riding. And so, in the morning, when the dew was still glistening on the grass, the caravan set off. The first few days passed through familiar places, farms, small towns, but gradually civilization was left behind. Ahead stretched vast prairies, endless steppes, where there was nothing but sky and grass. The pace of the journey was unhurried. The wagons moved at a walking pace, about 20 miles a day. They stopped for lunch when the sun was high. They set up camp before sunset. Near springs or rivers, the men grazed the cattle. The women cooked dinner on campfires. The children gathered dry branches, chips, dried bison dung, which burned better than wood. Evenings on the prairie had their own special beauty. Darkness descended over the endless steppe. Stars lit up one after another, brighter and bigger than anywhere else. People gathered around campfires, telling stories, singing songs to the accompaniment of harmonicas or banjos. Some read the Bible aloud. Others wrote letters home, which might never reach their recipients. But the prairies had dangers. The storms here were terrible. Lightning split the sky. Rain poured down like a bucket, turning roads into swamps. Sometimes the caravan would get stuck for several days, waiting for the ground to dry. And sometimes tornadoes would strike, destroying everything in their path. Then there were the rivers. Missouri, Platte, Salt, Green. Each one had to be crossed. And that was always risky. Wagons often capsized in water. Livestock drowned. Supplies got wet and spoiled. People died trying to save their property. The most frightening part was crossing the mountains. The Sierra Nevada, High passes, covered with snow even in summer, narrow mountain paths, where one wrong step could cost you your life. The wagons had to be dismantled, carried in pieces, then reassembled. Disease was a constant threat. Cholera, dysentery, scurvy, typhus. There was not enough medicine nor doctors. People treated themselves with folk remedies, but often without success. Graves lined the entire road, simple wooden crosses with carved names. The sea route around Cape Horn was longer, but more convenient for those who had money. Ships departed from New York, Boston, and other ports on the East Coast. The journey took 4 to 5 months, but passengers did not have to worry about supplies, weather, or Native Americans. However, the sea route also had its difficulties. The storms near Cape Horn were terrible. Waves as high as a 5-story building crashed against the deck. People were seasick for weeks. Food spoiled, water ran out, and if the ship got caught in a storm or the mast broke or the sails tore, the journey could be delayed for months. The third route, through Panama, seemed the fastest, by ship to Panama, then on foot or by mule through the jungle, and again by ship to San Francisco. But the Panamanian jungle was a hellish place. The heat, the humidity, malaria, yellow fever, tropical diseases that killed faster than any weapon. Many died in those jungles, never reaching the gold mines. Their graves were lost in the green thicket, where monkeys screamed in the treetops and large butterflies danced above the flowers. But those who survived, who made it to California, encountered a new world, a world of opportunities and dangers, hopes and disappointments. San Francisco greeted them with fog and wind, the sounds of different languages, and smells from all over the world. The city grew not by days, but by hours. Every day new ships arrived, new gold seekers, and all of them, these weary travelers from distant lands, had one goal. Gold, their dream, their hope, their curse. Gold prospectors camps in the valleys of the Sierra Nevada, where rivers carried their waters from the high mountains to the ocean. Cities grew, which they were never on the maps. They appeared overnight, like mushrooms after rain. Nothing like the orderly cities of the East. There were chaotic gatherings of tents, shacks, temporary structures, connected by narrow paths and ditches. Placerville, Hangtown, Gold Hill, Grass Valley. The names of these camps spoke for themselves. Some were named after geographical features, others after the first settlers, and some after what happened there. Hangtown, the town of the hanged, got its name after several public executions of criminals. Imagine a typical gold mining camp in the morning. Fog still hangs over the river, but people are already waking up. Some are lighting fires. Some are sharpening tools. Some are checking their simple supplies. The air is filled with the smells of coffee, fried bacon, smoke from the fires, and sounds. The clanging of metal, the splashing of water, the babble of voices in different languages. The dwellings in the camps were the simplest: tents made of canvas, shelters made of branches and leaves, dugouts covered with pieces of tarpaulin, some bill huts out of rough planks. But that was already a luxury. The floor, of course, earthen, covered with straw or old blankets. Furniture, if there was any in general, they were very simple: boxes instead of tables, logs instead of chairs. But the most important thing in the camp was not the housing, but the river. It was a source of hope, daily work, dreams of wealth. Along the bank stood rockers, long wooden troughs with holes in the bottom. Water and gravel sifted through them, and heavier gold settled in special pockets. The working day began at dawn. The men took their tools, shovels, picks, sieves, wooden trays, and went to the river. The simplest way to extract gold was called panning. Sand from the riverbed was collected in a round metal tray. Water was added, and it was carefully rotated. Lighter stones were washed away, and heavy gold remained at the bottom. It was monotonous, exhausting work, day after day, week after week, bent over the water, sifting through tons of sand for a few grains of gold. My back ached from constantly bending over. My hands were cracked from the cold water, but hope kept me going. Maybe today, maybe in the next trough there would be that nugget that would change my whole life. The food in the camps was simple and expensive. The basis of the diet, legumes, salted meat, hardtack. Hard biscuits that could break your teeth. Fresh produce was rare and a luxury. Apples were sold for $1 apiece. An incredible price for that time. Milk, butter, cheese had to be brought from far away, so they cost as much as gold. Food was cooked over open fires, in iron pots. The most popular dish was gold digger beans, beans with bacon, seasoned with salt and pepper. Coffee was brewed strong, black. It helped to get through the long working day. Bread was baked rarely. They more often ate the aforementioned hardtack, soaked in coffee or water. Many suffered from scurvy. Due to a lack of fresh vegetables and fruit, their teeth became loose. Their gums bled. Their strength left them. Those who understood the importance of proper nutrition paid huge sums of money for potatoes, onions, any vegetables. The gold miners' clothing was practical and durable. Levi Strauss jeans were just beginning to gain popularity. Most wore ordinary thick fabric pants, flannel shirts, wide-brimmed hats for protection from the sun. Shoes wore out quickly on mountain trails. So many people wore homemade moccasins or even went barefoot. Personal hygiene was a serious problem. Soap was expensive. There was not enough hot water. Many people washed once a week, or even less often. Parasites, lice, fleas were commonplace. Diseases spread quickly in such conditions. But not everything was gloomy in the gold mining camps. In the evenings, when work was over, another life began. People gathered around the fires, told stories, sang songs, played cards. Someone would take out a violin or an accordion, and then the camp would be filled with music. There were also more dubious forms of entertainment. Gambling, drinking establishments, brothels. All this flourished in an atmosphere where people had gold in their pockets and uncertainty in their hearts. Many lost everything in one night, what they had earned in weeks. Sundays were often days of rest. Some mended clothes, some wrote letters home, describing their adventures. Some just lay in the shade, regaining their strength. Religious services were held in the open air. A priest or simply a literate man read the Bible. The gold prospectors' tools were simple, but important. A shovel, a pickaxe, a sieve, a sluice box, sometimes a rocker or a long pan. Each tool had its purpose, its place in the gold mining process, and every prospector kept a close eye on his equipment, because losing a shovel could mean the end of dreams of riches. So day after day, week after week, life went on in the gold camps. Hard work, simple joys, eternal hope that tomorrow will be a better day, that the next pan would bring luck, that somewhere out there in the river sand lay their happiness. People of the gold rush among the thousands of gold seekers who arrived in California. No two stories were alike. Each had his own dream, his own reason for leaving home, his own hope for a better life. They came from all corners of the world, spoke different languages, practiced different religions, but they all had one thing in common: gold fever. John O'Brien was a simple farmer from Ohio. He had a small farm, a wife, Mary, 3 children. Life was difficult, but familiar. When news of California gold reached him, John did not get sleep at night. He imagined returning home rich, buying the best land, his children going to best school. After selling the farm, John left his family in his brother's care and went to search for gold. In his letters home, he wrote about hard work, about hope, about how he would return soon. But the months passed. There was little gold, and expenses were high. John fell ill with dysentery and died in a distant camp. He never saw his family again. Charles Weber, a wealthy merchant from New York, had a completely different story. He came to California not to dig for gold himself, but to trade with prospectors. Weber understood that real money could be made not by searching for metal, but by selling what the prospectors needed. He opened a store in Stockton, selling tools, food, clothing during the gold rush. He made a fortune greater than most of those who dug the ground, but one Sejin, a Mexican rancher who lived in California before the gold rush. For him, the arrival of the 49s meant the end of his normal life. His land, where cattle used to graze, was now being dug up by thousands of prospectors. The peaceful valleys turned into noisy camps. Sejin tried to defend his rights, but American law did not always recognize Mexican land titles. There were many Chinese among the gold seekers. They sailed across the Pacific Ocean, leaving their families and native villages behind. The Chinese worked in organized groups, shared their profits, supported each other, but they were viewed with suspicion, sometimes with hostility. American prospectors believed that Asians were taking their gold, their opportunities. Li Wong was one such Chinese traveler. He planned to stay in California for 2 years, earn enough money to return to China a rich man. But life had other plans. Li stayed in America, married a Chinese woman, opened a restaurant in San Francisco. His descendants still live in California. There were women among the gold miners. Although there were not many of them, Mary Austin came with her husband. But when he died of illness, she did not return home. Mary opened a laundry, washing clothes for the miners. It turned out that this was a more reliable way to earn money than searching for gold. In a few years, she became one of the wealthiest women in the camp. And Louise Clapp, an educated woman from the East, came with her husband, a doctor. She kept a diary, wrote letters to her sister, which later became a valuable testimony of those times. Louise described the life of gold miners, their joys and sorrows, their hopes and disappointments, through the eyes of a person who could see more than just gold. Thomas Benton was a young man from Virginia, the son of a planter who lost everything in card games. In California, he hoped to restore his family's honor, but Thomas was unlucky here too. His attempts to find gold ended in failure. Eventually, he settled down as a clerk in Sacramento and lived there for the rest of his life. As a modest civil servant, some stories were truly amazing. James Marshall, the very carpenter who found the first gold, never got rich from his discovery. He died in poverty, forgotten by those who came to seek gold thanks to his discovery. The irony of fate, the man who started the gold rush did not reap its rewards himself, but Sam Brennan, the merchant who first announced the discovery of gold on the streets of San Francisco, became one of the richest men in California without digging a single shovel of dirt. He made his fortune selling tools and supplies. Brennan understood That real gold was not the metal flakes in the river, but the needs of the people searching for it. Among the prospectors were educated people, teachers, doctors, lawyers, priests. Dr. John Morse left his practice in Boston to try his luck in the mines, but instead of gold, he found his calling in treating the prospectors in the harsh conditions of the camps. His medical knowledge was worth its weight in gold. The story of Reverend William Taylor is also remarkable. This Methodist preacher came to San Francisco not for gold, but for souls. He held services in the open air, on the streets, in the squares. His passionate sermons attracted hundreds of listeners, people who were looking not only for wealth, but also for spiritual support in difficult times. There were also some shady characters here. Jack Powers, the leader of a gang of robbers, terrorized road workers, attacked lone prospectors. His gang operated in the mountains, robbing caravan after caravan, until they were destroyed by the vigilantes. And next to him, in the same camp, lived Patrick O'Rourke, an Irish immigrant who had fled famine in his homeland. Patrick was an honest man. He shared his last piece of bread with his comrades. He helped the sick. He never found the great gold, but he found friends, respect, a new life. Every camp had its heroes and villains, its dreamers and pragmatists. Some came for adventure, some to escape debt, some just want to start life over. Gold was only a pretext. The real reason lay deeper, in the human need for change, in hope, in a belief that life could be better. An old Mexican man named Raphael lived in Angel Camp. He knew these places even before the Americans arrived. He told legends about the Indians, about the treasures of the conquistadors. Raphael wasn't looking for gold. He sold information. He told newcomers where it was best to dig, where it was dangerous to set up camp. His knowledge was worth more than gold. And in the neighboring tent, there may have lived Olaf Johansson, a Norwegian sailor who jumped ship in San Francisco. Olaf had never seen mountains. He didn't know what it was like to dig the earth, but he was strong, resilient, and gradually learned the art of gold mining. Women in the camps were rare, but their stories are particularly striking. Esther Morris, one of the few who came alone, without a husband. She opened a hotel, cooked meals, did laundry. She worked 16 hours a day, but earned more than many gold miners. Esther proved that in the New World, a woman could be independent. The children in the camps also had their own stories. 10-year-old Ben Holday arrived with his father, while the adults were digging for gold. Ben explored the forest, caught fish, studied nature. Later, he became a famous naturalist, wrote a book about the plants and animals of the Sierra Nevada. For him, the gold rush was not a curse, but a chance to discover a new world. So many different fates intertwined in the gold camps. The rich and the poor, the educated and the illiterate, the young and the old. They were all united by a common dream, shared hardships, and a belief that tomorrow would be better than today. And although most did not find the gold they dreamed of, they found something else, new experiences, new people, a new understanding of themselves. The dark side, but the gold rush had a dark side. Behind the glitter of metal lay suffering, disappointment, cruelty, death, in their feverish search for wealth. People often forgot about humanity, about justice, about the fact that true happiness cannot be measured by the weight of gold in your pocket. The first problems began almost immediately when thousands of people rushed to the same rivers. Competition for the best spots began. At first, the rule of first come, first served applied. Whoever arrived first had the right to dig, but this rule was quickly broken. The stronger ones drove out the weaker ones. Armed gangs seized the best plots at the Dry Diggings camp, which later became Placerville. A tragedy occurred that gave it the nickname Hangtown, the town of the hanged. 3 Mexicans were accused of stealing gold. There was no evidence, no witnesses, but the angry mob demanded punishment. Within hours, a lynching was organized, and the 3 men were hanged from an oak tree. This was not an isolated incident. Lynching became commonplace in gold mining camps. Justice was often administered by mob rule rather than by law. Those suspected of theft, murder, or fraud were tried right on the street. Punishments were carried out immediately. With no right of appeal, foreigners were treated particularly harshly. Mexicans, Chinese, Chileans, French. Anyone who was not a true American became victims of discrimination. In 1850, the Foreign Mining Law was passed, which imposed high taxes on non-Americans. Many could not pay and were forced to leave the camps. Diseases were an even more terrible threat than violence. Cholera, dysentery, typhus, malaria, scurvy. In overcrowded camps with poor sanitation, epidemics spread rapidly. Within a few days, a third of the camp's population could die. There were not enough doctors or medicine. People treated themselves with alcohol, prayers, folk remedies. John Bremner, a young Scotsman, arrived in California healthy and strong. After 6 months of working in the mines, he lost 20 pounds. His hair began to fall out. His teeth became loose. Scurvy killed slowly, but inevitably, John died in October, without ever sending his last letter home. Alcoholism became a real problem. Every camp had several taverns, saloons, where they sold whiskey of dubious quality, moonshine, infused with tobacco or gunpowder for strength. Cost less than water. Many prospectors drowned their disappointment in alcohol, losing all their gold in drunken card games. Martin Flynn, an Irish miner, found a nugget worth $500 in a week. He lost everything in the Golden Dollar Saloon. Martin drank for 3 days straight, and when he sobered up, he found that his debts were even greater than his fine. He had to work for the saloon owner, giving him all his earnings. Gambling flourished in camps. Cards, dice, roulette, the wheel of fortune. Professional card sharps came from big cities, cheating gullible prospectors. In one night, a man could lose everything. He had dug for months, and some, unable to bear the loss, took their own lives. Women of easy virtue also appeared in the camps, where there are lonely men with money. There will always be those who are ready to take that money. Many young women came to California not for gold, but for the men who were looking for gold. Some earned an honest living by cooking or washing clothes, but others chose easier paths. Violence was an everyday occurrence. Quarrels over gold claims often ended in gunfire. Everyone had weapons, revolvers, knives, rifles, and people were not shy about using them. According to statistics, in 1851, there were 2 murders every day in San Francisco. Gangs of bandits terrorized road workers, robbed convoys carrying gold. Joaquin Murrieta, the legendary Mexican bandit, became a symbol of resistance to American rule. His gang attacked mines, killed American prospectors, took their gold. The authorities offered a reward for Murrieta's head, but he was never caught alive. Corruption permeated all levels of government. Sheriffs, judges, mayors, everyone wanted their share of the gold pie. Justice could be bought. Like everything else, the rich avoided punishment, while the poor were hanged for the slightest offense. The environmental disaster was also part of the dark side. Thousands of prospectors dug up riverbeds, polluting the water with mercury and other chemicals. Forests were cut down for construction. Animals disappeared. California's beautiful nature was transformed into a lunar landscape. The American River, where Marshall found the first gold, became a murky stream a few years later, poisoned by mining waste. Fish disappeared. The water became undrinkable. The banks were littered with rock piles and abandoned equipment. Family tragedies were also part of the story. Thousands of men left their wives and children to go in search of gold. Many never returned, dying of disease, in fights, in accidents. Widows waited for years, not knowing what had happened to their husbands. Elizabeth Carter waited 3 years for her husband. He wrote letters, told her about his hard work, promised to return soon, and then the letters stopped. Elizabeth never found out that James had died of cholera in a distant camp and was buried in an unmarked grave. Child labor was also a problem. Boys aged 12 or 13 worked alongside adults, carrying heavy buckets of water, sifting sand. Many families had no choice. In order to survive, everyone had to work. Mental disorders were also common. Isolation, hard labor, constant stress, disappointment. All this broke people's lives. Many went mad, wandered through the mountains, talked to themselves. They were called gold madmen. Old Peter Jenkins searched for gold for 5 years. He found small grains, but had no great luck. Gradually, he began to see gold everywhere, in ordinary stones, in sand, in tree leaves. Peter spent the last years of his life convincing everyone that he was the richest man in the world. Even though he didn't have a cent in his pockets, behind the golden glare lay the darkness of human suffering, cruelty, injustice. The gold rush brought wealth to a few, but grief and disappointment fell upon thousands, and this shadow fell over the entire history of California, a reminder that all that glitters is not gold. Consequences when the fever of the gold rush gradually subsided, when the rivers had given up most of their treasures, when the camps were emptied one after another. California turned out to be a completely different land than the one James Marshall knew on that distant January morning in 1848. The most obvious change was in the population before the California gold rush. There were about 14,000 people living in California, mostly Mexicans and Native Americans. By 1855, that number had grown to nearly 300,000. California had transformed from a quiet frontier into one of the most populous states in America. San Francisco, that little port of Yerba Buena, became a big city. Its streets were bustling with life. Ships from all over the world stood in the harbor. Dozens of languages were spoken on the streets. Shops sold goods from China, Europe, South America. The city grew so fast that builders couldn't keep up. Many people lived in tents, even in the city center. But San Francisco was only the most striking example. Cities sprang up all over California. Sacramento became an important river port. Stockton, Modesto, Fresno, all these cities were born thanks to gold or to serving those who sought it. Agriculture also underwent radical changes. A huge number of people needed food, and this created demand for agricultural products. Farmers began to sow large areas with wheat, corn, raise livestock. California agriculture, which previously served only local needs, turned into a powerful industry. John Sutter, owner of the very sawmill where the gold was found, never got rich from the metal, but his land became the foundation for the city of Sacramento and that brought him more wealth than any nugget. Irony of fate, the man who wanted to keep the gold a secret became one of the richest men thanks to its disclosure. The state's infrastructure developed at an incredible pace. Roads, bridges, and railways were built. The Transcontinental Railway, which connected California with the rest of America, began to be built precisely because of the needs created by the gold rush. Now, travel from the east took days, not months. The banking system also arose from the needs of gold miners. Wells Fargo, Bank of California. Other financial institutions began as companies that transported and stored gold for prospectors. San Francisco became the financial center of the West Coast. But the most profound changes were in society. California became the most cosmopolitan place in America. People from all corners of the world lived here. Chinese quarters, Mexican barrios, European communities. This diversity created a unique culture, opened to new ideas, tolerant of differences. Women in California had more opportunities than in other states. The shortage of population, especially women, created a demand for female labor. Women opened hotels, restaurants, shops, became entrepreneurs. California was one of the first states to grant women property rights. Education also developed rapidly. Wealthy residents understood the importance of schools, colleges, and universities. The University of California, founded in 1868, became one of the most prestigious in the country. Many gold miners who had become wealthy donated money to educational programs. Technological innovations were also a consequence of the gold rush. The need for more efficient methods of gold extraction led to inventions in mining, hydraulic technologies, metallurgy. Many of these innovations were later applied in other industries, but there were also negative consequences. The indigenous population of California suffered the most. Their lands were seized. Their traditional way of life was destroyed. Many tribes disappeared completely. Victims of disease, violence, starvation. It was a real genocide, hushed up in official histories. The environmental consequences were also catastrophic. Hydraulic gold mining, which developed later, washed away entire hills, polluted rivers, destroyed forests. Some ecosystems never recovered. California's natural environment, one of the most beautiful in the world, bears the scars of that era forever. Social inequality also deepened. Although some became rich, most remained poor. The gap between rich and poor in California became one of the largest in the country. This created social tensions that lasted for decades. Crime, which flourished during the rush, remained a problem later on. California had a reputation as the Wild West, where might made right rather than law. It took decades of systematic effort to bring order. Politically, California became an important player. It joined the Union as a free state in 1850. This deepened the divisions between the South and the North over slavery. California gold financed the Civil War. It helped the West finally establish itself as part of the United States. Economically, the consequences were enormous. California gold increased the world's reserves of the precious metal by a third. This affected the global economy, trade, exchange rates. America became one of the richest countries in the world, largely thanks to California gold. The cultural consequences were also significant. The California dream, the idea that anything is possible in this state, was born at that time. The image of California as a land of opportunity, innovation. Freedom has its roots in the days of the gold rush. Literature, art, and folklore were enriched with new stories. Mark Twain, Bret Hart, and other writers created a romanticized image of that era, with gold miners as heroes and noble adventurers. The reality was much harsher, but the myth proved stronger. Religion was also affected. New religious movements appeared in multicultural California. Syncretic teachings, Eastern philosophies. This diversity created an atmosphere of spiritual exploration, which still characterizes the state today. Thus, the gold rush transformed California from a quiet frontier into one of the most important states in America. It brought wealth, progress, diversity, but also suffering, destruction, inequality. It was an era of great change that shaped the face of the state for centuries to come. And when the last prospectors left the exhausted mines, when nature began to slowly heal the wounds, the spirit of that era remained forever in the air of California. The spirit of dreams, hopes, faith that tomorrow could bring anything, conclusion. And so, gradually, like the evening fog descending from the Sierra Nevada mountains, we are approaching the end of our story. The story of the California Gold Rush is a story of human dreams, hopes, disappointments. It is a story about how grains of metal and river sand change the fate of an entire continent. Breathe calmly and imagine what those places look like now, where fever once raged. American thing,